You are listening to the We Are West Ham podcast, Opposition View, with me, Will Pugh. First one for a couple of weeks. I'm very sorry about that. We've explained in previous podcast why I haven't been able to deliver, but I'm delighted to say that David Mooney from the Blue Moon podcast joins us ahead of another game against Manchester City on the final day of the season, and yet another occasion when actually lots and lots of West Ham fans, and don't get all shouty with me if you're not one of those, but lots and lots of West Ham fans don't particularly want to win. It seems to have baffled a minority of pundits and even beloved Tottenham's manager Ange Postecoglou the other night that actually teams of certain football teams really don't like others, and that when their own seasons are over, their allegiances switch and they care more about their rivals losing rather than their own team winning. I don't really understand why that's so lost on a couple of people, but it appears that it is. Dave, it's great to have you with us on the We Are West Ham podcast. Great win over Tottenham on Tuesday. Half the stadium, despite it being a away game, was cheering for City. You managed to get over the line to leave yourself in the driving seat.
I tell you what, it didn't. When Son ran clean through on 87 minutes, it didn't feel like a lot of the stadium was on our side at that point. But
no, quite. But obviously, just to sort of a bit of context, if anyone doesn't know, I don't know where they've been, but obviously you're in the driving seat now. Win against West Ham on the final day will secure a record 4th Premier League title for your beloved City, I suppose. And of course, in the same breath, denying Arsenal. I must admit, I was guilty of just sort of not really engaging with any conversations with people who were seriously suggesting Arsenal were in the title race. I was like, well, you know what they're like? They'll just do what they did last season. They'll fall away. And City, who are clearly and objectively better, will go on to win it. Liverpool were too weak as well, particularly with the injuries. So the fact it is actually going down to the last game of the season is a surprise to me. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of all that, what do you make of all of this recently where, you know, Tottenham fans cheering, or some Tottenham fans cheering for Man City, most West Ham fans I know more than happy to roll over on the last game of the season because we've got nothing to play for? I know you're rarely in that situation anymore with your club, but what have you made of all of that, and particularly some of the criticism and fury that it's been met with by some pundits and Ange Postecoglou?
Yeah, I get it entirely because I grew up in an era where United won the title every other season anyway, and it was like a good season for City was taking some points off United and them not winning the title. That's how I grew up. So the idea that I think the thing with Postecoglou, I found his press conference after the game a little bit. If I was a Spurs fan, I'd have been a bit annoyed by that. Partly because I get it from his point of view. From his point of view, he wants the staff and everybody inside the club to be buying into winning that game. I don't think anybody who watched it would go that Tottenham were trying not to win the game, because I actually think over the course of 90 minutes, Tottenham probably marginally the better side. I mean, City's, when you look at the expected goals, City's is better, but I think largely because Haaland's chance that he scored was something like 0.93 xG for that one chance. So like, there is, I think on balance of play, I think Tottenham were well in the game. And I actually think like Postecoglou should focus on that for what he's done afterwards, because for the fans, it's understandably a very, very weird night. It happened a few years ago with City and Everton. City went to Goodison with, I think, 2 games left. And an Everton win would put Liverpool in the driving seat for the title, and they didn't want to do that. And then Ross Barkley scored and opened the scoring, and the mood in the ground was just very odd because they didn't really know whether they should celebrate it. But Everton clearly still wanted to win the game and still were trying to win the game. And I think there has to be a differentiation between what fans want and what fans engage with and how fans are, and what managers and players want. And like, it's fully fine, I think, for Postecoglou to say, like, there were staff in this place that wanted us to lose, and that isn't on. Absolutely fine. As soon as that crosses over into saying, I don't understand why the fans would want us to not win this game, all of a sudden, I think it's like, come on, you need to surely you understand what football rivalries are. Most of us,
you need counselling. And it's like, come on, mate, what are you using such inflammatory language for? It's like, get on board with the
Yeah,
people who support your club and pay money to go and watch them. That's what they care
yeah,
about.
that's it.
It's not
I'm
beyond the
incredibly
realms
fortunate.
of
Yeah.
normalcy, is it?
I'm incredibly fortunate as a City fan to have enjoyed the football and the success that I've enjoyed over the last 10, 12 years or so. But like most football fans don't get that. Most football fans go through their entire life without seeing their team win anything. So, of course, we all become really petty and small-minded and like
Take your wins where you can.
yeah, you want your rivals to not have that enjoyment as well. That's how it works. So, I mean, I fully get like if Spurs had won on Tuesday night, like like Arsenal fans would obviously be singing that they won the title at White Hart Lane or whatever it is that they'd be singing. So, like that's the sort of thing we do, and I think I don't ever think that should be lost. I think like we're always told. I mean, it's increasingly obvious that it's not true, but we're always told that the fans are the lifeblood of the game. And as ticket prices go up, and as it becomes harder to get to games, and as they move kickoff times left, right, and centre to make away games really difficult for certain sets of fans, this is just another one of those things in that ladder that says actually the people that are at the top of the game don't really get what it's like to be a fan anymore.
No, and it's weird with Postecoglou because look, it's easy to say now, and this isn't a case of sort of told you so or whatever. But I just felt you could just see what's going to happen when he comes in. He steams in, and it's all this breath of fresh air. He's a genius. We'll be playing this way for as long as I'm here, mate. Don't you worry about it. And then it's like, all right, fine. Like, okay, fair enough. But you could tell it had a shelf life, and you just know that if they again next season don't get in the Champions League where they previously have, right, you know that the fans will grow increasingly happy. He seems to already be growing a little bit grumpy, like the gloss on the old like PR sheen that he's painted on himself as he's come in seems to be wearing thin already. And you just think that one there is such an easy win. It's just like you don't have to be so inflammatory. I know it's part of his character, but you can just say, listen, mate, like everyone who gets paid a penny in salary by Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, I don't want to hear it. Like, I don't want to hear it. That's not what you're here for. We've still got European, like we could still get in the Champions League. If we win the game, if they'd have beat City and Villa, who did obviously lose to Liverpool, it would have still been on. I totally get that, and that's what we're going for. That's what I'm paid to do. But look, the rivalry predates my arrival at this club. I'm sure Arsenal.
I'm not going to tell fans how to feel. Yeah,
quite exactly. Yeah, I'd hope that everyone in the ground is cheering on Tottenham because it's big for us. But I'm sure Arsenal fans would be in the same position where they'd hate to see us win the title, and hopefully, we'll be able to put them in that position over the next couple of years. It's such an easy one to swat away whilst maintaining your connection with the fans or whatever. It just seemed an odd hill to die on. But on that note, I don't know if I'm going to get
on that note, Poznan in the away end on Sunday if it all goes well.
yeah, quite. I mean, like I'm sort of. I've said this many a time, and the listeners to this podcast will have heard this from me before, that West Ham and Man City have got this affinity anyway. I certainly feel it. Thanks in no small part to my very successful career with them on Pro Evolution Soccer 6 when I was a young kid. But I just my stance on it all, it's such an easy one that you must have had to bat away plenty of times. To criticise City with is the money. You're owned by an oil-rich state. It's unfair, distorts competition. Yep, all those things are true. Fine, but what my stance on City is that the fans, it's not their fault. No one voted. No Man City fans voted. They're proper fans. You get 25, 30,000 people in the fourth tier of English football. Like, whenever you City win a title, they're the ones I'm happy for. I'm happy for those. I appreciate you'll have an element of tourists and new era fans and all that sort of stuff. But I'm happy for those people who are around my age and older who've spent their hard-earned time and money watching crap average football that I have for most of my life. I think weirdly these people who crow that football's about the fans soon forget about them when they reduce the Man City argument to the money, because it's like, well, it's not about the fans then, is it? It's not the fans' fault.
And it's funny because so all of that is true, and that isn't to say that I don't think there shouldn't that I've got myself twisted up in negatives here now, but there should definitely be conversations about club
Of
ownership
course.
and the sports washing element.
Money
of what
distorts
they
competition.
are.
We don't need to
Absolutely,
debate
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But at the same time, as you say, it's like I'm not qualified to have those discussions anymore. I used to have them, and I used to try and get involved with them. But actually, what it turns out is that I like City winning things, and that distorts my position on it. And in terms of kind of any other fan base, had it been any other club that Sheikh Mansour and the Abu Dhabi United group took over back in the day, like the conversations would still need to be had about sports washing and about the influence of I mean, you'll find City fans who kind of get hung up on whether City are state owned or not, and I don't really care whether they are or not. It doesn't change whether City have the power that they have.
Your
They
owners have loads of money.
Yeah, it's kind of it kind of doesn't really matter. But I understand that some people get hung up on that, and at the same time, like that needs to be talked about in football. And if it was West Ham that had it, if it was Accrington Stanley that had it, and wherever things went, and kind of whoever became the dominant force because of it, those conversations would still need to be had. But at the same time, as you say, like, would you turn down the opportunity as any fan of any club to start winning everything that you've ever dreamed of? I've seen. I'm in the unique
and
position,
it's the only way to do it now, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that was the only way to do it. But I often
people go, "Oh, Leicester." It's like that's a flash in the pan. To do it
Yeah.
a sustained period.
You can't
money,
get
and
any
that's
other
it.
way.
Like,
Yeah,
let's stop
and
pretending.
I often wonder if City are the last title winners back in the '60s who were able to second division and kind of build a squad and then get up to the first division. Because you look at the kind of the eras that followed, and you talk about Liverpool in the '70s outspent everybody else, United in the '90s outspent everybody else, and
Blackburn even
Blackburn outspent everybody else. You look at I mean. It's such a Bertie thing to do to say this about United, but you look at how United originally got their platform, and there was very little between City and United in the early '90s. City spent their money badly, and United spent it well, and that was how the two ended up kind of where they were at the end of the '90s. And when
I suppose the Fergie effect helped.
Yeah, when Ferguson came in and they spent the money that they did in the early days of his reign, they hadn't won anything for a long while, and like I can't remember if they broke the British transfer record several times or if they came close to it. But they certainly had the most expensively assembled squad for the time. They won the title at the right time, and they won. The prize money had never been better, and suddenly they had a platform to build on, and they used it. I mean, through gritted teeth from my side, really, really well throughout the '90s and noughties.
Yeah.
And like. I accept that City's money gets them into the position where they are now. But I also think at the same time, you can't underestimate the value of the work that people like Guardiola have done. Because when you look at Mancini, you look at Pellegrini, they both had access to the same amount of funds and the same the same resources that Guardiola's had, and they've produced nothing of the sort like what Guardiola has done. He is a freak for just like what he gets the players to do and how they do it. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't think we ever will see anything like it in the years that follow. And what kind of I think that distorts the argument as well. Because I also think when Guardiola leaves, I think City are not as dominant as they have been in the last few.
They're probably like a Liverpool, maybe even an Arsenal. Just they'll be in the mix, obviously.
Yeah. People forget that before Guardiola arrived, City didn't win. City had won the title in 2014. He arrived in 2016, and then they won it in 2018. So it was 4 years where somebody else had won the title.
How did you cope?
I know exactly. It was awful. One of the worst times of my life, and it's one of those one of those dreadful eras.
You poor lamb.
You do talk about. I mean, I was talking to James for Blue Moon in the week, and I absolutely get kind of the difference between being on the inside and being on the outside, because you look at City from the outside in those 4 years, and you're absolutely right. It's like, check your privilege, mate, because like your privilege is that you're finishing in the top four every year, and you're seeing Champions League football year on year. But we were all moaning because Pellegrini City were actually not getting anywhere near winning the title, and they'd spent a lot of money, and like the the objective.
They were closer than Pellegrini's West Ham were, to be fair.
Well, it's exactly, yeah. But like the idea was that, you know, you've invested in this team. Why are you in 4th place? Ahead of Manchester United in 5th on goal difference alone? They're a laughing stock, and we're ahead of them on goal difference, and that's it. And you in the summer you brought in Sterling and De Bruyne, and like you've got Aguero, David Silva, Yaya Toure. These are players that should be doing better. And then Pep comes in and goes, you know what, lads, I got this. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So, like, and you kind of look at it from the West Ham point of view. From the outside, a lot of people will say, "Why is everybody upset with the way this season's gone?" David Moyes has done a great job at West Ham. He's won a European trophy.
I'm saying that from the inside as well.
Well, he's won a European trophy. You know, more points than ever. It's a top half finish, that sort of thing. And at the same time, I can also go, you know what? I understand, because, you know, how many times have you won in 2024? How's the football been? What does it mean to be a fan, and how do you feel as a fan? Actually, if it's not going that well on the pitch, you can talk about Pellegrini's League and Cup double with City, but actually 2 years later, they're really wimping out of this challenge, and the football isn't that great. So actually, I'm ready for a change. It's absolutely fine to look at those things with kind of like both viewpoints. And I think from the outside, that gets forgotten sometimes.
I think you're totally right. It's just like, I find that with literally everything in society, like every single thing has an element of one or more elements to it. Every single argument. I know sort of social media just polarizes everything. And you're either Moyes in, you're Moyes out, you're either Labour or Conservative, you're either this or that. You know,
you can be Moyes out right now and still think he's a club legend. That's how it works.
Well, that's what James do. That's James's stance, yeah. But I just find that, and it's almost like you're almost looked at a bit weird if you don't take a boldly really strong stance on anything. Like with the City situation, I just look at it as in, well, you've got, like, it's undeniable that the financial injection had an input on your success. That is also undeniable, and I think this is undeniable, that there isn't an element of it, the lack of organic growth. And when you mention United there, I get it that they're big spenders. It feels more, what they did feels and felt more organic than what City and Chelsea did, right? Chelsea first, then City. It that's why football fans have got a particular problem. Not me particularly, because again,
I understand that
view, but there is an element of, like, it lacks organic, which is why people are more inclined to go, it's a bit more manufactured than perhaps a United or
I totally understand that, and because I remember what it felt like as a City fan, as a mid-table Premier League side, watching Chelsea get the takeover and kind of how they built up and everything. So I totally get that. And again, the only pushback I would go to is, like, you look previously at United, the money that they initially spent was by floating on the stock exchange. So it was the same sort of overspending. It was just that in an era where overspending was, you know, spending 10 million on 3 players instead of spending 100 million on one. So I say it's like the market, the scale is, well, that's it. The scale has changed.
No, but I mean, even if you to like inflation or whatever, like,
but
if the City spending in that era would have been more than United's was at that time.
But it's again, I don't think it's a direct comparison with inflation as the measure, because like, the football landscape was different, is basically what it is. And because the other side of this as well is you look at what the Premier League is, and I mean, the Premier League didn't exist when United did this. The Premier League is basically, as I said before about City being not the cause of the problem but the symptom of it. It's just like the next stage in capitalism in how it
big time.
And you think of what the Premier League is. It's like, you would never have had, you know, pre-Premier League, you would never have had teams like Nottingham Forest, for instance, who have been able to come in and bring the type of players that they've brought in, and then still be in a relegation fight because the teams around them are also bringing in those sorts of players and the quality of players. I mean, the idea that you could be a lower mid-table Premier League side and seriously look at a player from, you know, from teams like Lazio or Juventus or really go out and sign those sorts of players and be an attractive prospect for them. Like 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. Whereas now, like pretty much, you could say as a West Ham fan, you know, like Lucas Paquetá as a player that you've brought in, absolutely
Starts
fantastic.
for Brazil, like
Yeah,
crazy. Emerson,
yeah.
wonderful player. Yeah,
These are wonderful players that, you know, in previous eras would have only gone to top clubs and to earn the most money and to you know, the team that would probably win the title. Whereas now the Premier League is there's this kind of paradox that the Premier League exists in, because it is the most competitive in that sense, but at the same time it's never been more dominated by one side. And like it doesn't like I can totally understand why 2+2 does not equal 4 in this situation, because as we're kind of talking about now, if City win the game on Sunday, they've won 4 titles in a row, and it's never been done in English football before. If they win 4 titles in a row, it's actually it's be 6 in 7 seasons that they've won. So it's like it's such a huge domination, and I can totally understand why fans of other clubs would go, I just wish somebody else had won it. And the paradox of all of this is that you'll find people say, like, let's say the unthinkable happens and City lose at the weekend and Arsenal win the title, and Declan Rice
really
gets his trophy for you guys. You think of that, like if that happens, you'll have people talking about how exciting this season has been, who, at the same breath, if City win it, and you know, if City win and Arsenal win and the table stays as it is, they will talk about how boring this season's been. And actually, what they mean is the final outcome is boring because I didn't want City to win the title. Whereas actually, the process of getting to the final outcome, like, has still been the same either way. It's just like one result that's different. So it is interesting to see how everything is talked about. And I mean, you look at people wanted a title race that has twists and turns, and I think you've had that this season, because at various different points through the season, it's been in City's hands, it's been in Liverpool's hands, it's been in Arsenal's hands. I think the problem is most people didn't really want it in City's hands come the final weekend, and that's kind of that's where we've.
I also think most people had a feeling it would be. I think I know you are right, but I think most people are still sitting there going, well, Liverpool have got too many injuries. Their young players won't be able to take them over the line. Fine.
Yeah.
Arsenal, same as last season. Like, they're good. They're just not City good. It feels like if Arsenal played City 20 times, like City win 13, Arsenal maybe win 5. There's a couple of draws in there. Like, that's how people feel. And
the big irony with all of that as well is that, like, if you ask City fans, I think City fans think this season the side isn't as good as previous years. I can only kind of speak for myself, and I can't speak for what
but even
the fan base as a whole feels. But I think
that sort of sucks the fun out of it a bit for other fans, because they're
I can get it.
You're still not that good, and you're still going to win it. Like,
but then at the same time, City have, in the last 6 weeks, they've gone, oh right, okay, we actually need to get our backsides in gear and do this, and they've been a completely different side. It's almost like they need that end of season pressure to be good. And like, I mean, they went through a run earlier in the season. I think it was 4 wins in 11 games, where they just kept drawing and losing games. And that's the worst run of the season for any of the top 3 sides. Liverpool and Arsenal didn't go on a run that bad at any point. And what that says is that as soon as they'd lost to Villa after that, they kind of went, oh crap, if we don't buckle up, we're not gonna be in this.
Might not actually win this again.
And so they buckled up, and all of a sudden the pressure was on, and they've been on an unbeaten run since the middle of December. And then everybody looks at it and goes, you can't compete with City. They've been on an unbeaten run since the middle of December. It's like, well, that you could compete with them before December. It's just that they hadn't they hadn't bothered thinking that they might want to try and win it this year. I don't know. So I understand it's really kind of, it's conflicting on all sides.
It's not so much. I just find, right, you're about to win a 4th Premier League title, and I think the reason that, let's be honest, right, lots of people, and I read your piece on Football 365 earlier on. Anyone listening, worth going to read it, because it's really good, from Dave, just about, you know, people and pundits and other non-Man City fans telling City fans how to think or feel and how they should be behaving. Really worth a read. But the one thing I will say, Dave, is that it is undeniable that the fact you're about to win a 4th Premier League title in a row, and the fact even when you won the treble last year, that a sizable amount of football fans, other than City, I totally get why you're like totally a dreamland, whatever, but a sizable number of football fans just shrug and go, and that is a direct result of the money. Like,
I think,
it's
yeah.
they're shruggable achievements because of the perceived way that well, not perceived, but like the element of your success that is just manufactured sort of out of money. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad or that you've got a choice, but you must at least understand that's how and why other fans feel that way.
I understand how that looks. What I always ask people who say that is like, the amount of money that City spent is obviously there and part of the context of what City have achieved.
Of what football is these days, it's just rubbish.
Yeah, and I get that. But at the same time, and it's like with the Premier League charges, which, like, you know, I have no idea how it's going to go, and I don't know kind of what the outcome of that will be. And I fully understand, because if it was Liverpool that had been charged with this and Liverpool had been dominant over the last few years, I would absolutely be 100% all over, you know, charges FC sort of thing. So I get it from the other side. But like, all of that doesn't add up to John Stones playing in the way that he did in the Champions League final. In that, you know, he's stepping out from centre back and becoming a roving free role midfield number 8. Like that is there is the element of money that that I understand why people get. Why people don't like that, and it kind of it feels the way it feels for them. But at the same time,
it hard for people to see.
It makes people. It makes it hard. Yeah, you can't. What people then don't see is the good stuff that people like Guardiola have come in and done with it. And it's like, they've got the money and they've got the platform. And I think you have to acknowledge that. As City fans have to acknowledge that. I think other fans have to acknowledge the work that has been done to achieve the things. And it's kind of like a 50-50. Let's shake hands somewhere in the middle. The sort of West Ham and City relationship sort of thing. You know what I mean?
No, quite. Listen, let's talk about the game then. On Sunday at the Etihad, last game of the season, West Ham, and I couldn't like deliver this with any more gumption. We couldn't have less to play for if we tried. We've come ninth. Whatever happens, doesn't matter how many we lose or win by. We're coming ninth. The players couldn't be more on the beach. The manager's on his way out. The players aren't playing for a manager or anything. The new manager that comes in is going to read absolutely zero into this game of football. Like, I would imagine this is
2-0 at half time.
Well,
2-0 West Ham at half time. Yeah.
It just feels like one of those days, you know, when you're going on holiday, right? And your annual leave's booked in, and it's like lunchtime on the Friday before you go on holiday.
Nothing's getting done, is it? Yeah.
You're just like, whatever. Like,
do not email me. Nothing.
Yeah. Out of office has already been written, just waiting to press the button. Like, you've just got to get through the hours. I imagine that's how every single one of the West Ham players is thinking. What do you sort of make of the game then? How do you think it's going to go? How do you think it's going to play out? Pressure obviously on you more, but it feels like you couldn't really ask for a better team to play at home. Like, none of our fans are going to be proper going for it either. It couldn't be nicer, surely.
Yeah, and the only thing I would caution with that is, I mean, there was a little bit of a narrative around the Villa game a few years ago because of Steven Gerrard and Liverpool and that sort of thing. And obviously, when you think back to the QPR game in 2012, they at kickoff they were fighting for survival, so they had something to play for. But the thing
that's
that
what I mean,
the thing that kind of makes me a little bit where the anxiety comes from is, you're right, the pressure's on City. City should win this. I don't know, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100. I don't know what the maths
probably
are.
More that, yeah.
With the situations of the teams, but I think the players are nervous, and I understand that, because there's something on the line that's never been achieved before. There's as much as we've just talked for a while about City and the money, as much money as City have had and as other clubs have had, no team has ever done 4 in a row, and that is a chance to be there and make history, and that comes with the added weight of pressure. You think back to the Fulham game last weekend, it finished as a 4-0 romp. But at the start of the game, it was a little bit nervy and a little bit tetchy, and they had to settle into it. And there was a couple of times players, like, the passing game didn't quite get going, and they passed it out of play. And it was only really with Nathan Ake going off injured that Guardiola was able to reshuffle and kind of build a setup that was a bit more stable, that he stuck with for Spurs. then they were again very nervy against Spurs. They actually spent 8 minutes in the tunnel ahead of the Fulham game, just waiting to get out on the pitch. So it was almost like that feeling of when you've got to be somewhere, you've got a train to catch or something, but it's like the train's in half an hour and it's a 10-minute walk to the station, and you're kind of like, well, I've got nothing to do, I'll just leave now. It's kind of like how they were in the tunnel. It's like we've got nothing else to say. We just want to kick off, but like kickoff's 10 minutes away, so we're going to stand in the tunnel and just wait for it. So that combined with the edginess of the performance against Spurs tells me that I do think they are a little bit nervous. I think they've just got to settle into the game quickly, and if they do, I think they'll be fine. They were clearly nervous against Villa in 2022. And Villa raced into that 2-goal lead. And even after Zinchenko came on and Sterling came on and they shuffled the setup, and after Gundogan scored and then Rodri equalised and kind of got things going again, I still didn't feel like it. When they went 3-2 up, I still didn't feel like they'd settled. I think they were very much kind of get us to the end of this game because this has not been a normal performance from us. That sort of thing worries me. Like it's the final day and there is no more room for mistakes here. If this was like 10th game of the season and it was to go top of the league, they would knock it out of the park quite comfortably because that's what they do. Weird things happen on the final day, so I'm always loath to kind of say, oh, it should be a walk in the park. I mean, of course, the irony is the last time he came to us on the final day and we needed to win to win the title, it was just a comfortable 2-0 and like everything was nicely done and dusted. I would absolutely snap your hand off for that again. Just a nice, comfortable performance where everything goes right. Yeah. There is hopefully no need for any drama.
Yeah, I don't think David Moyes has got much of an appetite for any drama either, or the players. I think it's just get over the line nice and fit, like for the summer. Don't get injured.
And with the Euros on the horizon as well,
big time. Yeah, I seriously, I mean, it couldn't be, if you were wanting an opponent, it couldn't be better. People try and paint it as, you've got that freedom. Sorry, like they're all human beings. They've got, if it's the Euros coming up, if it's the summer, no one expects them to win or do anything.
My experience of City in that position as well is the freedom thing is actually it is a thing. I think they did when they were safe back in the day and they'd hit 40 points. I did think that they played with a bit more freedom. But at the same time, it's like they play with more freedom at 0-0, and then they concede a goal and it's 1-0, and you're like, oh, okay, well, fine.
Yeah,
we're not going to try too hard. We had a season 2005-06. We had a season where we had a real chance of getting into Europe and we were mid-table. We were something like 3-4 points.
When we beat you in the FA Cup quarterfinals,
it was around about that time. It might have been the season before.
We got to the
round about that time. Yeah. And we lost that. In fact, it was that season because we lost that cup quarter final, and then of the final 10 Premier League games, lost 9 and won 1. And Aston Villa with a poor, unfortunate saps that lost to City in that run-in with a goal that was offside as well, so it shouldn't have been. But like all that illustrates is that like City was safe. They had nothing to play for. Well, they did. They had European positions to play for, and as soon as that slipped away from them, they were playing with a bit of freedom, and the performances were all right. And then suddenly they concede a goal and they lose, and it was just like fine. I think they finished something like 5 points clear of the relegation zone that year, and it was just kind of like it didn't really illustrate how good the first 2/3 of the season had been. But
quite. Listen, Dave, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on the We Are West Ham podcast ahead of Sunday's game. I don't often find myself saying to the opposition view guests, "Good luck," and actually meaning it. But I find myself in that position in this time. Just a quick fire one. Before we go, assuming all goes to plan and you do win the title on Sunday, and we're seeing Klopp on his way out, how long, I know it's the perennial question you probably ask you all the time, how long do you think Guardiola's got left at the helm?
It's hard, this one. His contract runs out at the end of next season. He doesn't really sign extensions until he's in his final year anyway. The first extension he did, I think, was early, but after that, I think it was in his final year every time. And I'm terrified that it ends at the end of next season because he'll have done, I think that'll have been 9 seasons that he's done. And I've never seen football like it, and I'll never see football like it again. And it's ruined. It's ruined football for me because like whatever comes after will just not be as good. And like I'll be sitting there going, just do what he used to do. Why are you not doing what he used to do? So I'm nervous that at the end of next season, there's still part of me that I have a little inkling. It's based on nothing. I have a little inkling that he'll sign an extension, but there is also the element of he's achieved everything he needs to achieve at City. If he wins the title this Sunday, then he is the standalone manager in English football for what he's achieved. You can make the argument with Ferguson just on sheer numbers, but at the same time, it's like Ferguson never won 4 in a row. There was Champions League. He's won every trophy that he can win with City. There's a lot to be said sometimes for just bowing out when you're at the top of your game and leaving. But there is the perennial question of the charges as well, because there is if he leaves before the charges are settled, then I don't think he feels any sort of obligation to see it through. I think if for whatever reason, if he
come out and say he would leave though if you're found guilty,
only time. Yeah, he said a few years ago that if they were found guilty at the Court of Arbitration for Sport, then the club had lied to him, and if they'd lied to him, then he'd leave. And then this time around, he's basically said, if they put us wherever, if they throw us into League Two, I'll be there. I'll call Paul Dickoff and Mike Summerby, and we'll play in League Two. So I kind of like, he kind of has, if they get found guilty and thrown out of the Premier League before he leaves, he's kind of got the obligation to see that through. So there's a little part of me that'd
be great, wouldn't it?
You know what? I want to see what. I want to see what he does in League Two. Yeah, I want to see what he does. But at the same time, I would much rather be found not guilty and he rides off into the sunset with all of his trophies, glistening in the sunlight.
Great. Listen, Dave, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on. David Mooney there from the Blue Moon podcast. That is us for Opposition Views this season as well. Thank you so much to Dave, but all of our guests. They really do bring something to the podcast. They're often your guys at home's favourite episodes. I don't take that personally that you're bored of mine and James's voices, but you do. You do like a bit of something different. It's probably one of my favourite parts of doing it as well, just getting to chat to other fans, and it sort of reminds you that, whilst football is a little bit about all the money and transfer news and all that sort of thing, ultimately it's about real people paying real money and spending real time to go and watch their team that they love more than anything else in the world. I've had some brilliant ones this year. My favourites, obviously the European ones, Bayer Leverkusen and Freiburg in particular, as well as all the ones in the beginning half of the season. I won at Olympiacos as well with Kostas, was great out in Athens. I've loved all of it all season. I'm glad you guys have enjoyed them all too. Thank you very much for listening. That'll be us for the Opposition Views. We've got 3 special guests coming up next week for like an end of season review, which I'm very much looking forward to. Details of that to follow shortly. And then me and James will have one more end of season review before our usual summer break. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks again to Dave. West Ham v City, last game of the season on Sunday. I don't care if West Ham win. In fact, I don't want West Ham to win for the first time in a very long time. Viva Man City, Blue Moon, come on you blue noses, whatever it is they say up there. All City, aren't we? Thanks for listening, everyone. West Ham are massive, up the hammers, and we'll speak to you next week.